George Whitaker wore his best shirt every Sunday morning. He buttoned it slowly because his fingers did not move as quickly as they once had. He combed his thin, white hair. He straightened the collar. He placed his worn Bible on his lap. Then he rolled his wheelchair close to the window of the nursing home and looked out at the parking lot. At first, his children came every week. Then every other week. Then once a month. Then only when something was wrong, but George still waited. Every Sunday. Same window, same Bible, same quiet hope. The nurses learned not to ask who he was waiting for. They already knew. Daniel, Rebecca, Paul, his adult children, the ones who had promised, "Dad, this is only for your safety. We'll visit all the time." And they meant it when they said it. That was the painful part. They meant it. But life became busy. Schedules became crowded. Excuses became easier. And George became what he had feared most. Not an angry old man. Not a helpless patient. A forgotten parent. But what his children did not know was that every Sunday night, after waiting by the window, George opened a small journal hidden inside his Bible, and he wrote their names, not as accusations, as prayers, because a father can forgive absence and still be broken by it. George Whitaker was 82 years old, a Christian man, a retired carpenter, a widower, and an elderly father who had spent most of his life working with his hands. His hands had built cabinets, repaired porches, fixed bicycles, carried groceries, held babies, folded in prayer, and once wiped tears from the faces of 3 children who believed their father could solve almost anything. Daniel was the oldest. Responsible, successful, always checking his watch. Rebecca was the middle child. Tender, organized, and afraid of emotions she could not control. Paul was the youngest. Warm, funny, easily distracted, and always convinced there would be more time. For years after their mother died, George lived alone in the old house. He kept the yard trimmed. He made his own coffee. He drove himself to church. He called each child on their birthday, and when they worried about him, he would smile and say, "I'm old, not gone." Then came the fall. It happened in the hallway outside the bathroom. Nothing dramatic, no great warning. Just one wrong step, one moment of imbalance, one body no longer as strong as the man living inside it. Daniel found him after George failed to answer the phone. The hospital said he would recover, but not fully. He needed supervision, help with medication, assistance at night, a safer place. The nursing home was not chosen out of cruelty. That mattered. His children did not throw him away. They sat in a conference room with brochures, insurance papers, medical notes, and tired faces. Daniel said, "Dad, we can't risk you being alone." Rebecca cried quietly. Paul said, "We'll be there all the time." George looked at their faces and understood more than they knew. They were afraid. So he agreed. Not because he wanted to go, because he did not want to become another weight his children resented. At first, the nursing home felt temporary. The staff was kind. The room was clean. There was a small window, a narrow bed, a wooden nightstand, and a chair where visitors could sit. Daniel brought framed family photos. Rebecca brought a blanket from home. Paul brought George's old radio. They visited that first Sunday with sandwiches from George's favorite deli. They laughed. They prayed. Daniel said, "See? We're still a family." George smiled. And for a while, it was almost true. The next Sunday, they came again. Then Rebecca came without Daniel. Then Daniel came for 20 minutes between meetings. Then Paul missed 2 Sundays and sent a message saying, "Sorry, Dad. Crazy week, I'll come soon." George always replied the same way, "No worries. Take care of your family." He meant it, and he hated that he meant it, because understanding someone's absence does not make the absence hurt less. The weeks passed. George learned the rhythm of the place. Breakfast at 7:30, medication at 8:15, physical therapy on Tuesdays, Bible study on Thursdays, bingo on Fridays. which he attended mostly because a woman named Mrs. Alvarez cheated so obviously it made him laugh. The nurses liked him, especially Nurse Evelyn, a calm woman with kind eyes who knew how to speak to elderly people without speaking to them like children. She noticed the Sunday routine, the clean shirt, the Bible, the window, the waiting. Sometimes a child came. Most Sundays no one did. But George never complained. When Nurse Evelyn said, "Your family must be very busy," George smiled gently. "They are busy. They have families. Don't judge them." Then he would turn back toward the parking lot and keep watching. The call came on a Wednesday afternoon. George had experienced shortness of breath and weakness after breakfast. Nothing immediately fatal, but enough to frighten the staff. Nurse Evelyn called Daniel first, then Rebecca, then Paul. By evening, all 3 adult children were walking quickly through the nursing home hallway, suddenly aware of how unfamiliar the building felt. Daniel did not know which room was his father's, without asking. Rebecca did not know the name of the nurse who cared for him most. Paul walked past the common room and realized he had never seen where his father spent most afternoons. They arrived at George's room and found him asleep, pale but breathing steadily. His Bible sat on the nightstand. His best shirt hung in the closet. Rebecca touched the sleeve. "Why is this here?" Nurse Evelyn, standing near the doorway, answered gently, "He wears it on Sundays." Daniel looked up. "Sundays?" "Yes," she said. "He likes to sit by the window." Paul frowned. "For what?" Nurse Evelyn hesitated, then said softly, "For you." The room became quiet. Rebecca looked at the window, the parking lot below, the chair nearby, the Bible on the nightstand. Nurse Evelyn continued, not accusing them, but telling the truth. "He never speaks badly of any of you. Not once. When you don't come, he tells us you're busy. He says you have families. He says not to judge you." Daniel looked down. Paul swallowed hard. Rebecca covered her mouth. They had imagined their father was becoming distant, maybe bitter, maybe withdrawn because of age. But the truth was worse. George was not cold. He was waiting and defending the people who kept giving him reasons to feel forgotten. That night, Rebecca stayed after her brothers left to get coffee. She sat beside George's bed and listened to the soft sound of his breathing. She had always been the daughter who organized things. Medication lists, insurance papers, appointments. But sitting there, she realized she had managed her father's care more than she had shared his life. She reached for his Bible, intending only to move it closer to his bed. When she lifted it, something slipped out from between the pages, a small black journal. The cover was worn, the edges bent. Rebecca froze. She knew she should not read it. Then she saw the first page had all 3 names written across the top. Daniel, Rebecca, Paul. Her hands trembled. She opened it. The first entry was dated nearly 8 months earlier. Sunday. Wore the blue shirt. No visitors today. Lord, keep Daniel strong. He carries more than he admits. Rebecca's eyes filled. She turned the page. Sunday. Rebecca called in the evening. She sounded tired. Lord, help her know she does not have to be perfect to be loved. Another page. Sunday. Paul forgot again. I think he means to come. Lord, remind him before regret becomes his teacher. Rebecca pressed her hand to her mouth. There were no accusations, no angry paragraphs, no list of failures, only prayers. Then she found the line that broke her. Lord, do not let my loneliness make me bitter toward the children I still love. Rebecca began to cry so hard she had to close the journal. Daniel and Paul returned and found her holding it. What is that? Daniel asked. Rebecca looked at them through tears. Dad's journal. Paul's face changed. What does it say? Rebecca could barely speak. He's been praying for us every Sunday. The 3 of them stood around their sleeping father's bed with a journal that told the truth more gently than any accusation could have. They read more in the family waiting room. Not all of it. Enough. Enough to see the pattern. George had recorded missed visits, not as evidence against them, but as places where he had to fight bitterness. He wrote prayers for Daniel's marriage, for Rebecca's anxiety, for Paul's children, for the nurses, for other residents, and sometimes for himself. Lord, today I felt angry. I smiled when Evelyn asked if I was all right, but I was angry. Forgive me. Teach me Christian forgiveness that does not pretend pain is small, but does not let pain become my master. Daniel stood and walked to the window. Rebecca cried silently. Paul sat with his head in both hands. Then Daniel whispered, "I paid the bills." No one answered. He turned around, defensive, even in shame. I made sure he had the best place we could afford. I handled the paperwork. I called the doctor. I thought. His voice faded. Rebecca finished softly. You thought responsibility was the same as presence. Daniel closed his eyes. Paul shook his head. I kept thinking there would be another Sunday. That sentence hung in the air. Another Sunday, another chance, another visit, another call, another meal, another moment to become the children they meant to be. Rebecca opened the journal again, hoping for comfort. Instead, she found the entry that became the deepest wound. It was written only 2 weeks earlier. I wonder if this is how my father felt. Rebecca stopped reading. Daniel looked at her. What? She continued, voice shaking. When I was young, I told myself I was too busy to visit him. Work, bills, the children, church, repairs, life. I sent money when I could. I called when guilt became too loud. He died before I learned that provision without presence can still leave a man lonely. Lord, I am not only the father who was forgotten, I was once the son who forgot. Paul covered his face. Rebecca whispered, Dad did this too. Daniel sat down slowly. The story was no longer simple. George was not just the wounded father. He was also a man carrying old regret. The pain in that family had not begun with them. It had traveled quietly through generations, wearing the same excuses in different voices. Too busy, too tired. Next week, another Sunday. George woke the next morning to the sound of whispering. For a moment, he thought he was dreaming. Then he opened his eyes and saw Daniel, Rebecca, and Paul sitting around his bed, all three, at the same time. No holiday, no funeral, no scheduled family meeting. Just his children. George blinked. Well, he said weakly, this must be serious. Rebecca laughed through tears. Paul stood quickly and took his father's hand. Daniel looked at the floor. George saw the journal on the chair. His face changed. You read it? Rebecca nodded. I'm sorry. George closed his eyes. For a moment, shame crossed his face. Not anger. Shame. That was between me and the Lord. Daniel stepped closer. Dad, we needed to see it. George looked at him. Daniel's voice broke. I thought putting you somewhere safe meant I had done my duty. George did not answer. Rebecca whispered, I was afraid to see you getting weaker. So I made calls. I organized things. But I stayed away from the parts that hurt. Paul wiped his eyes. I always thought there would be another Sunday. George looked at his youngest son for a long time. Then he turned his face toward the window. The terrible thing, he said softly, is that I know that excuse. No one spoke. George's eyes filled. I used it on my father. Daniel's face tightened. George continued. I told myself he understood. I told myself I was working hard. I told myself I had children to raise. And by the time I realized he'd been waiting for me, there were no Sundays left. Rebecca leaned forward. Dad. George shook his head. Maybe God is giving us the mercy to end what I helped begin. That sentence changed the room. It did not erase the missed visits. It did not erase George's loneliness. It did not erase his old regret. But it opened a door. And grace often enters families through the door nobody wanted to open. The story of George Whitaker is not a story against nursing homes. Sometimes a nursing home is necessary. Sometimes families make the safest decision they can with the information, strength, and resources they have. The issue was not that George lived in a place where he could receive care. The issue was that practical care slowly became emotional absence. The Bible says in Exodus 20:12, honor your father and your mother. Honor is more than sentiment, more than a framed picture, more than paying a bill, more than making a responsible decision and then disappearing behind it. Honor means weight, value, recognition. To honor an elderly father is to remember that he is not only a patient, not only a responsibility, not only a name on paperwork. He is a person, a soul, a memory bearer, a man who still needs to be seen. Ephesians 6:2-3 repeats the command to honor father and mother and calls it a commandment with a promise. That does not mean every family situation is simple. Some families carry deep wounds. Some relationships require boundaries. Some parents were harmful. Some children are overwhelmed. But where love is possible, presence matters. And Colossians 3:13 calls believers to bear with one another and forgive one another. Christian forgiveness does not deny pain. George's loneliness was real. His children's absence was real. His own past failure with his father was real. Forgiveness did not erase the journal. It turned the journal from evidence into invitation. An invitation to repent, to return, to stop repeating the same wound. Sometimes, the most powerful thing a family can do is not explain the distance. It is close it. That Sunday, George wore his best shirt again. But this time, he did not dress with quiet hope and quiet dread. Rebecca helped him with the buttons. Paul combed his hair badly enough to make him laugh. Daniel placed the Bible on his lap. Then the three of them rolled him to the window. The parking lot was bright with morning sun. George looked at the chair where he had waited so many Sundays alone. Daniel knelt beside him. "Dad, I don't want to make a promise I won't keep." George looked at him. Daniel continued. "So, I'm not going to say I'll be perfect, but I'm going to be present. Every Tuesday evening, I'll come after work. No laptop, no calls unless it's an emergency." Rebecca said, "I'll come Thursday mornings, and I want to learn your routine, not just manage it." Paul wiped his eyes. "Sundays are mine, and if I miss one, I'll tell you before, not after." George looked at them, and his lips trembled. "You have families." Daniel nodded. "Yes, and you are part of mine." Rebecca took his hand. "We forgot that in practice," Paul added. "Not in our hearts, but maybe that's the problem. We kept love in our hearts and forgot to put it on the calendar." George laughed softly through tears. "That sounds like something your mother would have said." They prayed together by the window. No dramatic music, no perfect words. Daniel asked forgiveness for confusing money with love. Rebecca asked forgiveness for letting fear keep her away. Paul asked forgiveness for always assuming there would be time. Then George prayed, "Lord, forgive me for the father I once forgot. And thank you for giving my children a chance to do better than I did." He opened his eyes. The parking lot no longer looked like a place of waiting. It looked like a place of returning. George did not leave the nursing home. His body still needed care. His children still had jobs, families, responsibilities, and limits. The story did not become perfect, but it became honest. Daniel came on Tuesdays. At first, awkwardly. He did not know what to talk about without turning the conversation into medical updates. So George taught him to play checkers again. Rebecca came on Thursdays. She learned the names of the nurses. She brought soup. Sometimes she simply sat and read, while George slept. Paul came on Sundays. He missed one after 6 weeks because his son was sick. But this time, he called before George put on his shirt. And the next Sunday, he came early. The journal stayed inside George's Bible, but it was no longer only a hidden record of pain. It became a memorial, a place where George wrote what Grace was doing. Sunday, Paul came early. "Lord, thank you for small beginnings." Tuesday, Daniel stayed without checking his phone. We spoke of his grandfather. I cried. He did too. Thursday, Rebecca asked what I fear most. I told her becoming bitter. She held my hand. Months later, George added one more line. "Lord, you are teaching us that presence is also repentance." Maybe you know George's story. Maybe you are an elderly father or mother who feels forgotten. Maybe you sit near a window waiting for someone who keeps saying they are busy. God sees you. Your loneliness is not invisible to Him. Or maybe you are one of the adult children. You love your parent. You are busy. You are tired. You are stretched thin. But somewhere along the way, practical responsibility became a substitute for presence. This story is not meant to shame you. It is meant to wake something holy before regret becomes your teacher. Call, visit, listen, ask questions, learn the names of the people who care for them. Do not wait until the hospital call. Do not wait until the journal is found. Do not wait until there are no Sundays left. The true honor of a parent is not only shown in decisions made for their safety, it is shown in time, given for their heart. And George Whitaker's family learned that the distance that wounded one generation can end when someone finally stops saying next week and chooses love today. If this story spoke to your heart, write the word honor in the comments. Let it be a simple prayer. Lord, teach me to love with presence before regret teaches me through absence. If this video helped you reflect, leave a like and subscribe for more Christian stories about faith, family, forgiveness, aging, healing, and biblical truth. And remember, honor is not only making sure someone is cared for. Sometimes honor is showing up before the window becomes empty.